Hi everyone. Welcome to today's presentation on driving provisioning from your HR system to modernize onboarding and offboarding. My name is Ryan Bradley. I'm a product manager here at Okta, and I'm joined today by Terrell Evans from Sonos, as well as Lee Murray, an Okta certified consultant. Today, we'll be talking about Okta's lifecycle management capabilities. And when we think about lifecycle management, we typically think about the lifecycle management journey in three buckets: provisioning, identity lifecycle, and access grants. Provisioning is how you manage your critical cloud applications. And with over 340 integrations in the Okta integration network that support provisioning, it's more than just your most critical applications. It can be any application. Identity lifecycle refers to how you automate the processes associated with someone joining, moving within, or leaving your organization based on data from your source of truth. And access grants are how you reduce the burden on your help desk through group app assignments, as well as access requests through Okta's app request workflow. During today's session, I'll be focused on identity lifecycle. As I mentioned before, we tend to group identity lifecycle problems into joiner, mover, and leaver buckets. But what exactly are joiner, mover, and leaver problems? Well, joiner refers to how you source identities from your third-party source of truth, such as a directory or HR system, and provide your end users with access to the resources that they'll require on day one. Mover refers to the mechanism by which access changes as a result of job changes, promotions, marriage leading to name changes, and leaves of absence, and how you keep that in sync with all of your downstream systems. And finally, leaver is how you revoke and remove access seamlessly whenever someone leaves your organization so that you can always maintain a strong security posture. So how have companies handled joiner, mover, and leaver problems in the past? Well, many organizations relied on Active Directory as their system of record for internal identity, and many still do today. As many as 90% of Okta customers still import users into Okta from Active Directory. Identity flows from on-prem HR systems into Active Directory and from AD to on-prem apps. However, AD can't fulfill all use cases around lifecycle management, particularly some of those around leaver flows. So customers were left deploying legacy identity management solutions like Oracle Identity Manager, CA Siteminder, and even custom scripts. Importantly, these solutions weren't built for a cloud world. They required the customer to deploy their own infrastructure and were focused on on-premises technology. Today, we've seen architectures fundamentally change as organizations migrate more and more to the cloud. Okta emerged to connect AD to the cloud, first with SSO, and then provisioning and MFA. More recently, we've seen on-prem HR systems replaced by cloud-based HR systems like Workday. As a result, customers are looking to retire the costly infrastructure required to connect HR to Active Directory. Instead, they want to invest in a more agile and scalable cloud-based architecture. In this world, identity data flows from Workday into Okta. Okta now handles provisioning both into cloud apps and Active Directory, and Active Directory still maintains its role for authentication into on-prem apps. We call this architecture HR as a source. So what exactly is HR as a source? Well, you might be familiar with a variety of different technologies, both on-prem and cloud-based. Whether it's HR systems like PeopleSoft and Workday, apps like Slack, Salesforce, Office 365, and Exchange, or directories like AD and LDAP. HR as a source is the architecture that brings together all of these technologies and helps you automate the IT processes associated with individuals joining, moving within, or leaving your organization, all based off of data from your source of truth, your HR system. And we do this via out-of-the-box integrations with 5 HR systems in our Okta integration network: Workday, UltiPro, Bamboo HR, Namely, and SuccessFactors, as well as with other generic tooling to connect to other systems, either via our on-premises provisioning agent or our CSV directory. And what are the benefits of HR as a source? Well, we really see the benefits across 3 different categories: productivity, security, and efficiency. From a productivity standpoint, HR as a source can help reduce your total cost of ownership as you retire legacy infrastructure, and also make your IT team more efficient by simplifying your organization and reducing the manual time spent managing brittle integrations. It also eliminates unnecessary back and forth between your HR department and IT, and provides your end users with seamless access to required resources on their first day. From a security standpoint, you can remove access promptly whenever you're offboarding a user and help move towards a least privileges access model. And finally, we know that compliance is incredibly important to many organizations. In order to pass audits, you need to show a process for removing access promptly, as well as a paper trail of fulfillment of access removals. HR as a source can provide exactly that process, and Okta's system log shows the paper trail. That's why we see a variety of organizations using HR as a source today, from some of the world's largest organizations like NTT Data and T-Mobile to other companies in multiple different verticals like Lyft, Shopify, and Sonos, who you'll hear from later today. Next, I'd like to dive a bit deeper on some of the automations you can accomplish using HR as a source, specifically around onboarding, automating manual changes from HR, and maintaining security while offboarding users. When onboarding users from your HR system into Okta, you can bring their identities into Okta via scheduled imports. Then, when the user is ready to start work, send them an activation email, instructing them to establish a credential and welcoming them to your organization. This will then trigger provisioning of applications for them based on groups and role, including Active Directory. And we recognize that not all attributes come from your HR system. Some, such as email or phone number, might come from a different system like RingCentral, Office 365, or Active Directory. And that's why we can write back these attributes from their source to the HR system, so your HR system presents a holistic, complete view of your end users. We also understand that users moving from one part of the organization to another can create a lot of manual work for IT. And that's why we've seen customers use groups in Okta as a proxy for resource access and to automate some of these manual changes. In this flow, we have a user, Steve, who's moving from the sales department to marketing. HR updates Steve's department to marketing in Workday. And then on the next synchronization with Okta, Steve's group memberships are updated so that he is added to groups for the marketing department and removed from groups only associated with the sales department, either via Okta group rules or imported app groups. This then leads to Steve getting access to the apps that he'll require in his new role, such as Marketo. Finally, we know that people will leave your organization, whether voluntarily or involuntarily. That's why when a user finishes work, we'll revoke their access and remove their licenses to downstream applications, even disabling the user in AD. We can do this either on their termination date or last day of work, or with features like our Workday real-time sync, handle more sensitive, immediate terminations where access needs to be removed as soon as possible. We've also heard from customers that they need more customization in HR as a source, and that's where we've seen them leverage Okta Workflows. When a user is imported from Workday into Okta, we can trigger a workflow based on the Okta user created event. Then we can take conditional logic. For example, first checking the user's department. Based on that department, we can then assign them to a specific onboarding folder in Box and add them to a specific channel in Slack, or notify their manager or other key employees of their start. Now, these are just a few use cases that you can accomplish with HR as a source. Next, I'd like to hand it off to Terrell Evans and Lee Murray to talk to you about some of the benefits that Sonos has seen from HR as a source.
Thank you for that introduction, Ryan. Hello, my name is Terrell Evans, and I'm the Principal Security Engineer covering the identity space for Sonos. Here with me today is Lee Murray, an Okta consultant who worked on our project from Veriton. Just a little about Sonos. We're based out of Santa Barbara, California. We're within about 10 million customer households today. We have about 1,400 employees across the globe and about 900 non-employees across the globe as well. What does identity and access management look like at Sonos? Identity at Sonos is broken into multiple pillars. These pillars are critical points covered by the IAM processes and policies that we have in place. The first pillar is administration. Within the administration pillar, our global automatic onboarding and offboarding takes place. For all employees and non-employees, the account creation is automatic, and we create 10 to 20 accounts a week via these authoritative sources, and we disable about 5 to 10 users a week via these sources. Our authoritative sources currently are Workday and SharePoint. The next pillar that we have is authentication, and within this pillar, we cover RBAC for all employees and non-employees, which takes care of birthright access, kind of to what Ryan alluded to earlier with groups. Using groups, we can assign users applications as well as distribution lists and a countless set of other things. In addition to that, we have adaptive MFA currently set up as well, and a full implementation of that suite. In our auditing pillar, we're completely SOX compliant via controls supported by this automation. We have change control review processes for system changes, and we have real-time auditing and monitoring of our Okta and AD systems. Within the automation pillar, we have multi-system identity management automation covering onboarding, offboarding groups, compliance, as well as different integrations to other tools. Okta is our identity source of truth. To do this, we utilize Okta Workflows and templates, and we also use the Okta on-premises provisioner. Covering this slide, this is what the legacy infrastructure looked like prior to acquiring Okta's HRaS. You can see in this process that there are a lot of hops, and the time to onboard for a user or the time to offboard for a user was very high. Some of the issues that we encountered with this legacy process: infrastructure complexity. With this configuration, we had 5 potential points of failure, and those points of failure, and I'll go back to the previous slide, are ADP, IdentityNow, Active Directory, Okta itself, and any potential third-party application. So in reviewing all of this, if a point of failure occurred in one tool, we would have to investigate that entire stack in order to determine where the issue actually took place. In addition to that, that also caused a high time to onboard. Within the provisioning and deprovisioning issues, complex SailPoint rules would often fail and either create duplicate accounts or not create the user at all. And it's kind of due to how locked in place the rules are. Once they're set, they can't really be tweaked. So in a real-time environment, this would cause issues. In addition to that, attributes could be out of date until the next full sync could actually occur. And because of the infrastructure complexity, that full sync could take several hours to get through the entire stack. There are additional costs with this setup. With us using rules, we had to acquire expert services in order to edit rules in the SailPoint system in IdentityNow. That requires an engineer from SailPoint to go behind the scenes and actually edit those rules. In addition to that, we had additional hardware costs for the agent servers and the virtual appliance servers. Rolling over into integration failures, due to there being no graceful handshake between the two systems, one system was completely unaware of another system's failure, so you would get into a domino effect with issues. And with the integration failures, we had a lack of easy automation. Due to the stiff nature of how the infrastructure was put in place, there wasn't a lot of easy customizations that we can make for this. So how do we resolve this? We had to go back to the drawing board as a company and reevaluate our HR source. And this was really due to the limitations of the ADP API system, which was a critical point for us. Everything starts with the HR source. So as a result of that, the decision was made to implement Workday. With implementing Workday, as Ryan also alluded to, we were able to leverage HRaS within Okta. And actually enable a real-time process between the Workday system and the Okta system, which was also a graceful handshake. Okta and Workday work together to build this connection so it's completely supported and it's not a custom integration. In addition to that, we also developed Okta Workflows to replace the rules in SailPoint. Workflows is a critical piece to this effort. In doing so, we were able to prevent duplicate account creations, and we were also able to stage, suspend, or activate user on later dates to handle our pre-hire flows. And finally, the huge win for this was discontinuing employee provisioning via SailPoint. This was critical as it removes a massive system in front of Okta and removes that point of failure potential. Here's the result. Within this slide, you'll see a more optimized and streamlined flow. There are only 4 potential stops in this process. An account gets created and hired in Workday. That account is sent over to Okta via the next scheduled import. And then Okta takes care of pushing that user to Active Directory as well as any other third-party app via Okta rules and Okta groups. Same thing with our mover flow. If a user's department was to change in Workday, that information would come over to our Okta tenant via real-time sync or the next available import, and Okta would proceed to push those updates down to the third-party tools. In addition to that, the leaver flow also works a lot better and a lot faster. We get our terminations in real time now, and we also have the immediate termination functionality. All right, and I will be passing it off to Lee Murray to cover some more details about Okta Workflows.
Thanks, Terrell. So wanted to highlight a few things that we leverage the Okta Workflows for to enhance the Okta and Workday integration. As Ryan and Terrell showed you, I mean, Okta has a built-in connector for Workday. It's very, very seamless, very much out of the box to provide that connectivity and to trigger those lifecycle events in Okta from Workday. So now that workflows are available, this gives us a tool to kind of further enhance that, to add some other customizations that are kind of specific to Sonos and do some kind of cool things around some of the attributes and the timing. So 3 we highlighted here. The first, we're generating a unique ID and email address for new users. As you can see, a lot of these are around the joiner or new hire type scenario, where a lot of the complexity lies typically. In this case, this is a standard problem that companies have is, when you get a new user coming on board, generating a new ID that's unique for them, you may have an existing user with the same first and last name. So it's the process of generating that unique ID. The benefit that Workflows provides here is that, out of the box, Workday does provide some username generation rules, which work great when all of your user population is in the Workday system. But a lot of companies like Sonos have some other user populations outside of Workday, like contractors, for example. So we have to include that in kind of the process to generate unique usernames. But obviously that's working in tandem with the kind of out of the box, Workday imports that Ryan and Terrell described, right? So taking advantage of the Okta user created event hook, for example, to trigger the workflow. Second one is delayed activation. And this is, kind of related to the first one in terms of we wanted to wait to provision user accounts until we had generated the new user IDs and email addresses before we provisioned downstream to any target applications, and also kind of controlled some timing there in terms of when the user accounts get created and when the user can actually access the system. So again, leveraging the built-in pre-start interval, which is a nice feature in the OIM connector, to have the Okta account created before the start date and also provision downstream apps as well. But we wanted to leave those in a suspended state so the user couldn't really access the accounts, but we'd have time to get them set up beforehand. And then the last one, it's kind of a typical detail you deal with when you're provisioning to Active Directory. Active Directory has the manager attribute in a certain format, which is the distinguished name format. In this case, we're getting the employee ID of the manager coming across from Workday. So we're using the workflow to basically transform that using the manager's UPN and then eventually to the manager's DN, which goes down to the AD record. So I'll go ahead and dive a little bit deeper into the unique ID and email generation workflow. As we mentioned, it's useful for determining uniqueness for employees and users that are not in the Workday system, in this case, contractors. We're using the same type algorithm that you would normally use coming from Workday with first and last name, also using preferred names coming from Workday, which is, again, available in the out-of-the-box connector. Also did some special things around replacing non-Latin characters that were causing issues, in some of the downstream apps if we had special characters and some usernames. So we put some code in the workflows to do that. And then, doing the typical kind of incremental digit to add uniqueness, like adding a number 2 if needed. So to give you guys a little bit insight into how that was built, this is just a quick screenshot of the Workflows console in Okta. There's lots of other, I think, Octane sessions and other good resources about, workflows in general and how to use the console. But just to give you a little context and what it looks like, this is the beginning of that workflow with some of the cards and actions in there. This next slide kind of brings it back up a level and shows you the overview diagram that the Workflows console also generates for your workflow. So you can see a lot of the steps that were involved there. And just some highlights, we use a lot of child flows called from parent flows, which is, good practice in any, development type scenario. As we mentioned, it's triggered from the Okta user created event hook. It's using the built-in Okta app connection that's available in the workflows to really either trigger events inside workflows from Okta Lifecycle events, or also make API calls to Okta using the user API to either query or do updates to the Okta users. Some other highlights, we used workflow tables to sort configurations, another nice feature there, including, email suffix or domains, and then the non-Latin characters and substitutes. And then in terms of implementing the logic, it's using a lot of the standard workflow features that you can see, including text, objects, branching, etc. And then lastly, just a note that Okta now has templates available in the workflows for a lot of these kind of scenarios. So there is actually one there for generating unique usernames as well. So you can kind of take that and use that as your starting point and then, customize that for your environment. So I think at this point, I'll hand it back to Terrell.
Thank you, Lee. To summarize the wins, we implemented Workday-as-master, which reduced our steps from more than 6 down to 4. Our time to onboard for each user is now less than 5 minutes, which is critical for last-minute creations. We have a lot less points of failure to troubleshoot, saving countless engineering hours. Updates and changes to our users are now faster and more efficient, utilizing real-time sync and scheduled imports. In addition to this, Okta allows us to update Workday with things like email, which is critical for keeping our HR source up to date. Okta Workflows mitigates the risk of account duplication and allows for customizations, while rules in SailPoint were a bit restrictive. There is no additional infrastructure to set up, so along with application costs, we're also saving infrastructure costs as SailPoint required additional hardware such as virtual appliance or an IQ service server. To kind of highlight the big wins here, we actually reached out to our IT support team to get a tidbit from them. And we asked the question, how much time has user automation saved you? And the answers that they gave is the greatest time savings comes from the consistency that it provides. The manual process lends itself to fact fingering and other manual errors. We no longer have those issues or issues like blank characters in the account names. Huge win for our support team overall. So what are our future plans? With phase one being complete, HRaS-master was implemented and Okta is now our identity master. We're actually, as we speak, working on phase two, which will incorporate our non-employee automation into Okta. All of our non-employees are housed in SharePoint, so we will use Okta's OPP or on-premises provisioning agent and set up SharePoint as an authoritative source within the Okta system. Okta will then master non-employees and write back to AD and third-party applications. And we have a later phase three, which will dive more into workflow automations with things like Jira, further integrations with Google Workspace, such as moving files in Google Drive on deactivation, or automatic deactivations on inactivity, or welcome email personalizations. And with that, I will hand it back to Ryan to close us out.
Thanks, Terrell and Lee, for sharing the benefits that you've been able to realize using HR as a source. I can stand up here all day and talk about the features of HR as a source, but it really means nothing in comparison to real-life experiences. As you heard from Sonos, they were able to improve their organization's agility, retire legacy infrastructure, and increase their IT team's efficiency through implementing Workday as a source with Okta. Next, I'd like to share a bit more about recent developments in HR as a source in 2020, specifically focused on performance and visibility. We've eliminated opportunities for failure in synchronization between your HR system and Okta. We've also improved the performance of some of our longest running synchronizations by over 33%. And from a visibility perspective, we released the import monitoring dashboard this year. The import monitoring dashboard provides a summary view of currently in progress and recently completed imports, so you can track synchronization between your source of truth and Okta and investigate deeper into issues with past imports. And this is GA in the product today, so please check it out. In 2021, we're focusing on improving the customization of HR as a source. First off, we'll be introducing more flexible import schedules. Currently, you can only schedule imports to occur at hourly intervals. But with flexible import scheduling, you can specify the time of day and day of the week for synchronization with your source of truth. And you can set separate schedules for incremental and full imports as needed by your business. This will be GA in the third quarter of this year. Additionally, we've heard that Okta lacks the building blocks to customize any joiner, mover, or leaver flow. For example, when an employee is terminated in the HR system, they can either be suspended or deactivated in Okta, or left unchanged. This is too rigid for some organizations with more complex offboarding needs. Instead, they might want to first update the user in Okta's universal directory, then move them to a special OU in AD, and only after those two actions are complete, deactivate them in Okta, triggering deprovisioning. That's why we're introducing the ability to replace any out-of-the-box joiner, mover, or leaver automation that Okta provides with your own custom logic. And this will be EA in the fourth quarter of this year. Finally, we've heard that it's difficult to connect a source of truth without an OIN integration to Okta. That's why we're building a new set of APIs which will enable you to send data from your source of truth to Okta and leverage all of our existing HR as a source capabilities like profile mappings, attribute level sourcing, user matching and confirmation, import monitoring, and more. As you can see in this flow, you can build an automation, potentially using Okta Workflows, which pulls data from your source of truth, either via API or report, on a schedule, then performs some data manipulation or check, for example, checking if a user is of a certain type, as an example, an employee, and only if this condition is met, sending that data to Okta via this new API, which will then be processed according to all of our existing HR as a source capabilities. This will be EA in the fourth quarter of this year as well, but to give you a sneak peek of what we're looking to provide, I've prepared a brief demo for you. I'm going to show you a new API that we are building to connect any source of truth to Okta and leverage our existing identity lifecycle capabilities. For my example, I've selected the subject of one of my favorite early pandemic binge watches, The Last Dance and the Chicago Bulls of the 1990s. As you may recall, and can see here in the Bulls Okta organization, several Bulls players left the team after the 1993 season, including Michael Jordan. To represent the 1994-1995 Bulls, I've created an identity source in Okta, which is able to leverage the capabilities of Okta's HR as a source integrations, including user matching and confirmation, profile sourcing, profile mappings, and more. For simplicity's sake, I've represented data about the players on the 94-95 Bulls using a table in Okta Workflows. However, you can imagine that just as easily this could be data extracted from an HR system via API or report, or data in a flat file. You'll notice that at the start of the season, Michael Jordan wasn't on the team, so we don't see him in this identity data quite yet. Next, I've built a workflow which pulls all of the data from my table, then, for each user or player on the Bulls, manipulates the data before sending the profile data to be processed by Okta. Finally, in my parent flow, once all data has been sent to Okta, I will then indicate that data is ready for processing by Okta's import pipeline. So let's take a look and see what it does. Testing my flow. And we'll be able to see the parent flow execution as well as the child flow execution. So it looks like the child flow executed successfully. Let's just double check in our flow history. Yep, I see a history of successful child flow executions as well as data being sent successfully via our new API to Okta. So let's see the results in Okta's universal directory. I'm going to go back to my identity source. Now, we'll go to the Import tab. Here, I see a slew of new Okta users. Note that this includes both new users as well as users that are exact matches to existing Okta users. First, with my existing matches, I'm going to confirm that these are the same user. And next, I'm going to create new Okta users for all of the new Bulls players. But what happens when Michael Jordan rejoins the team midway through the season? Well, to show what would happen there, let's recreate Michael Jordan in our source. We should see Michael Jordan created in Okta and reactivated from his previously deactivated account. One more thing I realized, I also never mapped data about each user's college to Okta. So, if we went in and we looked at an existing user in Okta, such as Scottie Pippen, and looked at his profile data, we'd see that his college is empty. Let's change that by adding a mapping for his college. Go into to Okta settings. See what attributes are unmapped. We can add a mapping for college. So let's map. And we'll pick the college attribute, which I need to add to my app user profile. So go into Profile Editor. In my profile here, add an attribute for college. And then we'll add a mapping for that attribute. And it looks good to me. So let's save. And I won't apply mappings now. I'll apply them when users are next imported. So now let's try our parent flow again. This time, when I test the flow, we'll iterate through all of the users in the table, which now includes Michael Jordan. And in the child flow, we will process the data, getting all of the relevant profile attributes, including the user's college and their manager, send them to Okta, and then in the parent flow, trigger processing by Okta's import pipeline. Let's see it happen. As we wait, there we go, it's processed, and we've seen a successful import. Let's go back to Universal Directory and see the impact. So, going back to our integrations and import, we see that there's no one that needs to be confirmed because all of our imports updates should have flown through to Okta, and we should have seen updates automatically applied. So if we go back to our identity source, we see that Michael Jordan has now been created with the Bulls organization. And if we go to Universal Directory, we see that Michael Jordan is now active again in the organization, whereas he was previously inactive. And players like Scottie Pippen have been assigned their correct college. As we see here, the University of Central Arkansas. What's more, if I want to see the results of these imports in the past synchronizations, I can go to our import monitoring dashboard and see the past synchronizations that we've performed from the Chicago Bulls identity source. As you saw in that demo, we really view Okta Workflows as the future for connecting to any source of truth and customizing any HR as a source flow. That's why we're looking at building more connectors directly to HR systems in Okta Workflows this year. And looking forward to 2022 and beyond, we're looking to build a robust ecosystem of HR integrations and automations. Lee mentioned Okta Workflows templates earlier, which are GA today. In the future, we want to add more HR as a source targeted templates to Okta Workflows, such as the potential examples that you see here, so that you can add any HR as a source automation or integration to your organization directly from a template and customize it to meet the needs of your organization. And we expect these to start becoming available in 2022. So, to make sure that we build the right thing to meet your needs, we need your feedback. And that's why I want you to sign up for our upcoming beta. We're looking to gather more information about the HR sources that you're looking to connect to Okta, as well as the joiner, mover, or leaver flows that you need help in customizing. If you want to be part of this beta and share your feedback with us, please fill out the survey at the QR code on this slide. I'll leave it up for a few seconds. And that concludes today's presentation. Thank you so much to Terrell and Lee for joining me today. I'd also like to recommend that you check out these other sessions on Lifecycle Management and Okta Workflows. And enjoy the rest of your Octane.